Hey everyone, so I haven't had much time to do any type of filming or reviews for the past few months, and I don't see that changing in the foreseeable future. So what little time I have available to make videos, I want to dedicate that time to doing reviews, why you should reads, and just recommendation lists. So for that reason, I'm probably not going to be putting out any monthly TBR or wrap-up videos this year. So with that said, I decided let's do one big video that covers probably somewhere around 75% of the books I'm going to read for the entirety of 2024, including some that I've already read in the past 2 months. So without wasting any time, let's get onto that list, starting with the 12 series I'm hoping to complete in 2024. First of those is the Rift Wars Saga by Raymond E. Weiss. So I started this with Magician's Apprentice. So as most of you know, I mainly do audiobooks, and Magician has been split out into 2 books, Magician Apprentice and Magician Master. And I've listened to Magician Apprentice already and really enjoyed it. This is one I'm definitely planning on putting a review out for because it was not at all what I was expecting. But that video is probably going to come after I do Magician's Master. The next series is the Dandelion Dynasty. So already halfway through this series, and admittedly, it's a little bit of a struggle for me. It's good, but these books are long and they just keep getting longer, and it's fairly slow moving. And that's just not a style that works well for me. So I've enjoyed the story, but struggled with the story at the same time. So I have been giving them 4 stars. I'd be shocked if I give either of the last 2 books anything higher than 4 stars. Because again, it's a lot of work for me to get through these books. So as much as I like the story, I don't like having to put in that much work to get the enjoyment out of it. When I'm reading a book that I absolutely love, it never feels like work, and these do. So there's no way I could give them a 5-star read, even though I do think they're a good story overall. Another series that I'm most of the way through already is Temeraire. This is one where, again, I don't think I'll give any of these books 5 stars either. I've enjoyed all of them. They just haven't been mind-blowing or can't put down or want to immediately reread. It's just been a solid series overall. Nothing spectacular, but no lulls or really bad parts either. It's just been steady throughout the whole time. The next series is a continuation of trying to get through everything Adrian Tchaikovsky has written, at least all the fantasy, and that's Echoes of the Fall. I've read the first book, solid book. Again, nothing spectacular about it. Tchaikovsky has this weird way for me where I like the book, but I never love the book. So he keeps putting out 4-star reads for me, and it's always enough that I want to read more of what he's written, but never to the point of I can't put this down and I need to pick up the next one now. So my favorite authors, I tend to binge everything they go through. Tchaikovsky, I have to space his out a little bit. So I get through a few every year, which probably means with how fast he writes, I'm never actually going to catch up. All right, on to the next series. You have The War Eternal by Rob J. Hayes. I read this first book last year, and I quite enjoyed it. And it was just a matter of I couldn't fit the rest of the series into my TBR last year. So this year, I'm going to make sure that there's, at some point, I can get through the next 4 books. Based on the first book, I wouldn't be shocked if The War Eternal ended up getting close to that top 10 completed series list for me. Next is The Iron Druid. Now, obviously, I love Dresden and loved Alex Verus, so it just seemed right that the next urban fantasy I pick up is The Iron Druid. These are what I consider the big 3 in urban fantasy, and I enjoyed book 1. I like how it's a bit different where Dresden and Verus both start off as a young wizard. Main character in here, he is not young. He is, in fact, extremely old and very powerful, but he is trying to stay hidden. So it's kind of a different perspective of people that are building their legacy versus one who's already built a legacy and just wants to have a quiet life. So far I've enjoyed it. I haven't heard as much about the Iron Druid Chronicles as I have the other series, so I'm interested in seeing where it goes from here. Next on the list is a self-published trilogy, and that's the Dragon's Blade trilogy by Michael R. Miller. I buddy read this with Jordan, the boiled jellyfish, and it was okay. My favorite book in it was actually the first book, because I thought it was really an original idea of dragons that are stuck in the shape of a human. And the main character, there was a spell cast on him that saved his life, but basically meant he was reborn. And instead of being raised with dragons, he's raised with humans. So he has to try to balance his dragon nature with being raised as part of humanity and try to bring those two species together. And at the same time as he's battling literal demons, he has to fight his own internal demons as his memories from his past life pop up and he starts to remember more of who he was, and then seeing what was done to him and the world he grew up in versus the world he was entitled to grow up in. Next is The War for the Rose Throne by Peter McLean. This is one I've actually heard. It's not really my typical style, so there's a chance I DNF this. It's supposed to be a lot darker than what I usually read, but I also already own the books on Audible, so definitely gonna at least give it a try. Hopefully I can get through all of it. Again, my buddy Jordan, I know it's one of his favorites, and he's been trying to get me to read it for a while, so this year I am going to pick it up at some point. Next, you have the Rainwilds Quartet by Robin Hobb. So I loved Tawny Man, and part of me wanted to go from Tawny Man right into Fitz and the Fool. I was ready to just keep binging the series, but I know I have to put in Rainwilds and in between those two to get the full story. And Rainwilds just gets bashed so much that it's hard to get excited for this series, but I also want to read it so that I can get to Fitz and the Fool. So I don't know when, because again, every time I think about let's start Rainwilds, I hear someone else talk about how bad it is and giving it 2 stars, and it's like, it's just hard to hype yourself up for something that so many people criticize. I know a few people have said that they absolutely love it. I just don't expect myself to be one of those based on what I've heard of the series. So we'll see if I make it through it. I might just ask someone to give me some type of a summary and then skip on to Fitz and the Fool. The next series is Cycle of Fire by Janny Wirtz. This is another one I know absolutely nothing about it. I just know Nico loves Janny Wirtz, and he's been praising her books for at least the last year, pretty much nonstop. And this is one of her series that's available on audio, whereas most of her books I don't think are available on audio yet. And for that reason, I'm starting with Cycle of Fire. Hopefully some of her other books do get an audio narration, because based on what Nico's saying, I do think I would end up enjoying her writing. And then the last two are the 5 Warrior Angels by Brian Lee Durfee and the Shadow Campaigns by Django Wexler. Now, I know virtually nothing about either of these. I've seen them mentioned a bunch of times, but don't know any details about the story or the plot or the characters for either of these. So I'm kind of enjoying getting to go into both of these series basically blind. Moving on to some other series that I don't think I'll complete the series. Maybe because they're not completed. Maybe because I just don't think I could complete them realistically this year. But for whatever reason, I don't think I'll complete the series, but I do think I'll spend quite a bit of time reading some of these books. You got A Song of Ice and Fire by George R. R. Martin. This is one, it took me a while, but I finally read A Game of Thrones last year and hoping to get caught up with the series this year. Obviously, no rush on getting caught up. I just suspect that once I get into the series more, I'll want to keep reading it and not have a long gap between the first 5 books. Let's leave the long gap for between books 5 and 6. Next series is The Cinder Spires by Jim Butcher. I already read book 1, The Aeronaut's Windlass, and I really enjoyed this. So this is the 3rd series by Jim Butcher I'm reading, and this first book is easily his best first book that he's written, obviously, in my opinion. I enjoyed it from start to finish. Might end up making my top 10 of the year. That's how much I enjoyed it, and it's one of the first books I read this year. Moving on to some historical fiction series, you got the Sharp series and the Saxon series, both by Bernard Cornwell. He's easily my favorite historical fiction writer at this point, with the Warlord Chronicles being one of my favorite series. The Sharp series and the Saxon series both have a ton of books. They're both in the teens, if not higher than that. I think the Sharp series might actually be in the 20s. So no way am I going to be finishing these books. I'm going through them fairly slowly because I've heard both series can get a bit repetitive, especially reading both of them at the same time. Kind of the same setup. And with the Saxon series specifically, I'm going through an audio, and when I look, there is at least 5 different narrators throughout the series, and that is tough for me to deal with. The first 2 series had, I think his name is Jonathan Keeble. Absolutely fantastic. I love his narration. The third book changed narrators, and it really impeded my enjoyment of the story. I even DNF'd it for probably about 6 months because I needed to wait long enough where I could get past the narration change. But even getting past it, I just don't think this narrator did nearly as good of a job. And there's a lot more narrator changes coming up, and it's just hard to deal with. You get used to one voice being a character, and when the voice changes, it seems like the character changes. So I'm not a fan of that at all, so it's going to be a long time for me to get through the Saxon series. Another series I'm hoping to get to is Mother of Learning. Now this one is another one that I've heard, it's not quite my typical style, so we'll see how I actually feel about it, but my friend Jordan, it's one of his favorites, so I want to at least check it out, and I already own the first book on Audible, so might as well. And then the last series I want to mention, this is definitely a question mark, the most questionable one on this list as to whether I'll actually get to it or not, and that's Malazan or Malazan by Steven Erikson. I own all 10 books, and I'm at the point where it's been about 2 years. I haven't started it yet because I just haven't been in the right mindset, since everyone talks about how big, epic, complex, how difficult this series is, and I just haven't been in the mood for something like that. But now it's getting to the point where I feel like I either have to start the series and see if I like it, or unhaul the books. I'm getting a little bit tired of seeing them on my shelves and being kind of mocked for not getting to them. They're just calling at me saying, hey, we're still here. And that's starting to get to me a little bit. So there's a decent chance some point this year I at least begin Malazan. All right, this next part is I asked 12 of my book friends to send me 12 recommendations, so one book each. And the goal of this was to kind of branch out, to find books that weren't on my radar, and that's a huge success. Going through these 12, most of them I had never heard of or had no interest in reading or no plans on reading. So I'm just going to go through these quickly because, again, I don't know much. The first is The Spirit Thief by Rachel Aaron. Second book is Dawn of Wonder by Jonathan Renshaw. And this one, I want to call out that we are doing a buddy read for this in April on the Wizards Enclave Discord. You got me, Andrew, Nico, Tori, Kay, Christopher Navo. All of us are planning on reading this in April. So if you're interested, that's the Discord to check out this April. In the Orbit of Sirens by T.A. Bruno. This is another one that I know is one of Jordan's favorite series. It is sci-fi, which I don't read as much sci-fi. It tends to be more hit or miss for me, so we'll see how that goes. The Art of Prophecy by Wesley Chu. I had heard nothing about this, but when it was recommended to me, I looked it up and it sounded very interesting. The Willful Princess and the Piebald Prince by Robin Hobb. This is kind of a prequel novella to Realm of the Elderlings. Age of Assassins by R.J. Barker. I've only read one other book by R.J. Barker, and it was kind of mediocre for me. I struggled a bit with the pacing and just never really got invested in the plot or the characters. So we'll see if Age of Assassins works out better for me. Between Two Fires by Christopher Buehlman. The only Buehlman book I've read is The Black Tongue Thief, which started off really good. Didn't like the second half as much. This book, Between Two Fires, is supposed to be, I think it's more of a horror story, which, again, not a genre I typically read, but the whole point of this was to branch out and not only read things that were already on my radar. The Vagrant by Peter Newman. Blood Over Bright Haven by Emma Wong, author of The Sword of Cayenne, which is one book that I really enjoyed and kind of started me down the self-pub path. So hopefully I enjoy that one as well. The next two are The Lost War by Justin Lee Anderson and The Black Coast by Mike Brooks. I know nothing about either of these. And the last one is The Doors of Eden by Adrian Tchaikovsky. So this is going to help me get through more Tchaikovsky this year. This is one of his sci-fi, which I haven't done any of his sci-fi yet, so we'll see how that works out. And those are the 12 random book recommendations from 12 of my bookish friends. A few other random books that I'm planning on reading this year, or at least trying to read this year. You got Cage of Souls, another Adrian Tchaikovsky book. Thankfully, this is a standalone. I'll be buddy reading this with Jordan. Probably in March is what we're aiming for. We'll see if that works out. Engines of Empire by R.S. Ford. I've tried picking this up a couple times, and I've just never been in the mood for it when I have. So hopefully this is the year where I actually do get to continue with that book and don't just put it down after the first chapter or so. Next, you got Blackstone Heart by Michael R. Fletcher. This is one I saw some really positive reviews for a while back. I put it on my wish list, and thankfully buddy Nico picked it up for me, so thank you, Nico. I really appreciate it. Hoping to get to this sometime this year. Probably in the first half of the year is what my goal is for that one. And then last random book is Good Omens by Terry Pratchett and Neil Gaiman. I tried this a couple years ago and ended up DNFing it because at the time I was really into more epic fantasy and didn't really like absurdism or just funny books in general, but lately I've been more into fun, lighthearted books and wanted to give this another try, so I picked up a copy of it. It's another one that I think I'll be getting to sooner rather than later. Now these last three books, I'm going to call these stretch goals because there is no audio available for any of them, and anyone who's been following the channel knows that if it's a book without an audiobook, it could take me months to get to it and another few months to read it. So the physical books I'm hoping to get through this year are The Sins of Kings, which I absolutely love this cover. You got The Daughter of the Beast, which I won from a giveaway as one of Dom's Patreons, or Dominish Books. And this is currently, I believe, still an SPFBO finalist. So hoping to get to that. And the last one is one I really want to read, and I've been holding out, waiting for an audiobook because I know this is going to take me a long time to get through. And that's Illborn by Daniel T. Jackson. Unfortunately, I heard that he's decided not to go the audiobook route at all. So that was a bit of a bummer for me. So I really want to get to this story. I think this is one that could easily be top 10, top 5 of the year for me. If I get to it, it's just so hard for me to find time to do any type of physical reading. On top of all that, you have a bunch of new releases coming out that I'm really looking forward to. Sanderson, Tchaikovsky, Sullivan, Sebastian de Castell, Benedict Draka, maybe Jim Butcher, Ryan Cahill, Drew Hayes. A lot of my favorite authors are publishing books this year. So anything they publish, I'm planning on checking those out, but I've already created a video for that. So if you want more information on what the new releases are that I'm looking forward to, go check out that video. With that said, that's about 75 to 100 books that I've already have planned for this year. Let me know in the comments, what books are you looking forward to? What do you think of any of these books? Do you want to buddy read any of them? And which ones of these were your favorites if you've read any of them? And until next time, bye.